Talofa lava, this is Pacific Waves from RNZ Pacific. I'm Susana Swiswiki. Coming up.
I wouldn't call it bold. I would call it realistic, but I think quite targeted.
All eyes are on Samoa. Also, a new report looks at how Kiwis view the region, and
it's always hard coming against teams like this that have been playing test matches and have been here before.
Australia hammers Samoa at the Women's Rugby World Cup. Samoa goes to the polls this week with pre-polling on Wednesday and the main voting day on Friday. 50 parliamentary seats are to be contested, with the Fast Party seeking to repeat its dramatic 2021 victory over the long-standing HRPP, despite a split in Fast ranks, ultimately leading to the snap election. I spoke with our reporter Grace Viva'ai, who was in Samoa, and began by asking her what locals are saying in the lead-up to election.
Talofa lava, Susana. Well, besides the humid weather, it feels like business as usual here in Apia. With buses full, I've seen shops open, people going about their day, but there's, quite a sense of anticipation as well. On my flight, I spoke with some Samoans who had come here just for the election to vote. One person told me that they wanted HRPP back to govern. Another was firmly for Fast. So they've come to vote for Fast. But one woman in particular, she didn't want to share who she had voted for. And I found what she had said interesting. She said to me, it's up to God and only God will know who I will vote for. So the views are quite mixed. But, the common hope is, I guess, for a calm and fair election. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of anticipation around the election, but in terms of the party leaders, what are the policies or promises that they're proposing to their voters?
That's a good question. And so, over the few weeks of the campaigning for election, we've seen a lot of what they've offered, and a lot of them are offering different visions. For example, Lauli, who leads the Fast faction, are promising free hospital services, as well as monthly allowances for pregnant women and children, cash top-ups for low-income families, and even a $300 million revival of Samoa Airways, where we all know that, Samoa Airways went into liquidation. And then you've got Tula Epa, who runs and rules, who is the leader of HRPP. They're leaning towards more towards on like welfare, which means 500 tala per family member each year, extra disability and birth payments, as well as VAT on free staple foods like rice and milk and chicken, which has gone up due to the cost of living here in Samoa. And then the caretaker Prime Minister Fiame and the SUP party are focusing on reforms like free education, healthcare, bigger pensions, disability support, and also returning land to villages. Yeah.
Just coming back to the voters, do you know the official numbers of those that have registered, and what about those that are coming from overseas? Can you speak to the numbers from the diaspora, please?
Yeah, well, it's been a while since I last spoke to the Electoral Commissioner, but from what I remember, the Electoral Commissioner said that just over 102,000, which was 117,000, just over 117,000 people actually needed to register to vote. And because, with the time frame and the snap general election, they weren't able to get the 117,000, but they have gotten just over 80% of those who are actually meant to be registered, one of the highest totals, I guess. What's interesting is that the Commissioner confirmed 72 people from overseas who have fully registered online, meaning their biometrics are all fully done and they'll be traveling to Samoa to vote. And so that's more than 80%. And another interesting thing is that because of the 72 people who have registered online, it's interestingly enough to note that over 8,000 people also registered online here in Samoa. But the Commissioner pointed out that a large of the diaspora appeared to have also simply travelled home and registered locally, often through like dual citizenship, and that's that was harder for him in the office to track as well when I asked him. It'll be interesting, I guess, to see how many overseas Samoans have actually ended up on our local roll this way as well. But generally, 72,000 people from overseas who have registered online.
Yeah, because there's been a lot of Samoan diaspora. They've been quite interested in the selection, right?
Yes, yes. And well, funnily enough, you say that there's been a lot of, social media backlash, especially from the diaspora. And then, you see the locals as well, telling the diaspora, well, you need to kind of stay in your lane, leave politics to us who are here on the ground in Samoa, living here, who know, what's best and what's going on. And then, they're also saying, well, it's the diaspora who are making too much noise, but the diaspora also feel like, they have the right to make noise because they're also sending money, from overseas to help out with, things like whalarangi for the families. So that'll be very interesting to see ahead of the election coming up this week.
A research report surveying New Zealanders' perceptions of the Pacific is calling for deeper ties with the region. Commissioned by the Pacific Cooperation Foundation, or PCF, the report recognises New Zealand's multifaceted and important relationship with the Pacific. I spoke with PCF's Chief Executive, Joanna Burke, and began by asking her what exactly does PCF do?
Thank you, Malo Lele. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. Pacific Cooperation Foundation, what do we do today? So really our mission is still the same, to change the narrative around Pacific people, both in the region but also New Zealand, and look at how we can better connect the diaspora with the region and vice versa. But also it's about lifting that awareness and excellence that Pacifica bring, or Pacific people from right across Te Moana Nui a Kiwa bring to New Zealand, and enriching New Zealand and its identity as a Pacific nation. So, that is quite a broad sort of definition or explanation of what we do. But right now we're focused on strengthening identity of New Zealanders, deepening relationships, which we do through our internship programs, and then also the other one is around amplifying voice, and how do we give Pacific people who don't normally have platforms to be able to share their stories, whether it be around climate change or labour mobility or economic empowerment and development. So across a whole broad range of subjects. But that's what we do in a nutshell, is just strengthening our identity as Pacific throughout the Pacific.
With the mission of bridging that gap between the Pacific and New Zealand, recently PCF has just released a report called the New Zealanders' Perception of the Pacific. Could you tell me a bit about that? This is the third one that's been done, right?
Second one.
Second, all right.
Yeah. So the first one was done back in 2022. And I suppose if you look at that time in 2022, globally we were coming out of the pandemic. And so it was probably a really good time for us to go out to New Zealand, given what we were facing globally, to ask them, what are your real perceptions of the Pacific? And really provide kind of a pulse check as to whether or not New Zealand is doing the best that they can in lifting and elevating our status as a Pacific nation. So 2022 was the first one that we did, and there were some really standout stats. But basically, in a nutshell, it said to us that New Zealanders want to learn more about the Pacific and want to engage more with the Pacific. And it really gave us an entry, or, it's a great conversational starter when it comes to talking about Pacific people as a general. If we pinpoint some of those things, it was things like, will you travel to the Pacific? Aside from everyone going to Fiji, because they do quite a lot to market themselves, it's also looking at tourism across the smaller nations and whether or not New Zealanders look beyond tourism as a reason to engage or learn more about the Pacific. And yes, tourism, when you ask questions about, what greetings do you understand or know. Of course, Bulla was at the top, and then, Samoan was next, and then Cook Island was next, and then you went further down the list. But the gap between Fiji and Samoa was actually quite wide. So when you look at a stat like that, it gives us a reason to further engage. What can we do to lift knowledge and understanding around our languages with our New Zealanders? But also remembering that you and I identify as New Zealanders. Like, we're New Zealand because we're born and raised here. Yeah. But they're New Zealanders who are, Kiwi New Zealanders, or they're Indian New Zealanders. So that whole perceptions report was not just asking Pacific, the diaspora, what your perceptions are of the Pacific. It's asking people who identify as New Zealand or New Zealanders, that they're born and raised here, what their perceptions. So when we engaged with the research company, we wanted to make sure that they were going out and getting a proper and true indication of what a New Zealand or who a New Zealander is, and asking them for their perceptions, versus one would expect reading the report, and which is what I faced when we were out socialising it, that they automatically assumed that we were asking the Pacific diaspora what their perceptions are of the Pacific, when actually it's quite the opposite. We ask a broad range of ethnicities as to what their perceptions are of the Pacific. So 2022, there were some big stats there that allowed us to go and engage with, business, engage with government around policy design. It also allowed us to engage with academia and communities as well, to share the insights, but also share with them what these insights provide around opportunities to engage better with Pacific communities. We felt that it was time, given that a lot has happened since 2022, to re-engage and see if whether or not there has been a shift in the perceptions, but it was more a pulse check. Let's see if whether or not we're seeing any other changes, or if whether or not the findings that we found in the inaugural report have actually been acted on. So the reason for the second report is really just to provide a pulse check as to whether or not we're seeing a change, or what are we doing well at, or what can we do more of.
And has there been any change?
There hasn't been a large shift, which is not a bad thing as well. But what it's done, what the second report has showed us, is that we need to do a lot more to strengthen our connections with the diaspora, as well as everyday New Zealanders who are saying now that they still want to learn more about the Pacific. How do we do that? So in the last report, it said that, over 50% of New Zealanders were aware of the Pacific but wanted to learn more. This year, it's the same stat. It's between 50 and 55% of New Zealanders say that they are aware of the Pacific, but they want to learn more about the Pacific beyond tourism.
Yeah.
Another big stat is that New Zealanders feel that the Pacific is quite important in the economic development, but also the economic recovery and the growth of New Zealand. It should involve and will involve the Pacific, and that the Pacific is a strong partner for New Zealand in their development.
So what happens now with this report? Does it go towards government agencies to influence policy making decisions? Where does it go to next?
So this report was commissioned by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade. So we were funded to actually do the second iteration. So it will definitely go to all government departments, especially at the sort of foreign affairs level. But we want to be able to have it available for everyone that is working with policy or policy design for not just the Pacific region, but also the diaspora. And we're also wanting academia to be able to use it to see how it can inform, some of the research or further research that should be done in the Pacific. We also want it to be used by communities. We want it to be used by sort of workplaces as well, who have large Pacifica workforces, or who are seeing that the diaspora or their workforce is changing, and they're looking for ways to better engage that this is how the report can be used. So it can be used by everyone, but initially it was for Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade to be able to provide them with a pulse check as to what is happening in the region that New Zealand has quite a bit of influence in.
Speaking of MFAT, I know the last time that you spoke with us, PCF's annual funding of 1.4 million had been slashed last year, but you also stated that the organisation had to prove to the government and to stakeholders that PCF can actually add value. Is that still the case here?
Very much so.
Yeah.
And I think, without delving too much into it, the priorities of government have changed, especially for foreign affairs and trade, and there are also a number of Pacific agencies that are doing their part to connect, obviously, the diaspora with the region. So it is quite a contested space. And yes, we're still having to prove ourselves to government to justify further funding. So we've received, small pockets of money that are targeted towards programs, which is great, especially with our internship program. We're able to still provide internships for Manaaki scholars. Those are scholars who come from the region and study here. But also we've been successful in securing funding through Education New Zealand, through the Prime Minister's scholarship to Asia, to take a group up to Thailand at the end of this year. So we're not getting that budget that we would get annually as a Crown agency. We're now having to compete with other agencies for program-related funding.
It's been a tough start to the Women's Rugby World Cup for Samoa and Fiji. The tournament got underway at the weekend with several lopsided scores and the favourites living up to the tag. Christina Persico reports.
Hosts and world number ones England kicked off the World Cup with a 69-7 thrashing of the United States. The pre-tournament favourites have now won 28 games in a row. England coach John Mitchell has a warning for the rest of the teams at the tournament.
We've still got plenty to do. We've only just got started. We're in our pre-season really, so we'll get better. And we're not a side that doesn't, mark ourselves hard. So we'll mark ourselves hard, but it's just the way we are.
England's victory set the tone for an often one-sided opening weekend. Game 2 saw Australia facing Samoa, and 11 tries later, the Wallaroos were record-breaking 73-0 winners. Australia had the better of possession and territory in the first half, scoring 3 tries in the first 10 minutes. Manusina had more possession in the second half, but lost opportunities inside Australian territory. 2 yellow cards didn't help Manusina's cause. Skipper Suapawa Racer told Sky Sport they knew it was going to be tough.
Very disappointed with the results today, but it's always hard coming against teams like this that have been playing test matches and have been here before.
You threw yourselves into the game. Some of the physicality was phenomenal. Where did it just get away from you?
I think for me, leading the team, I will always put my body on the line for our country, and just with our families, just being far away from families and my kids back at home. It is disappointed, but I know that we will be better.
Later, Fiji took to the stage against world number 2 Canada. Despite the heavy loss, Fiji's coach, Eoin Cunningham, says he is proud of the performance, but they will have a good honest review. He says they showed what they can do with their almost length of the field try just after half-time.
Senevutu again, who said Prop's been lively. Now an opportunity for Josephine and Mahu. Now Alfredo Fisher, the captain. Here they go, the Fijiana. Oh, it's brilliant. Rossi Lomani, what a try. The Fijiana are flying in York.
Unfortunately, that was the only try the Fijiana could manage, as Canada piled on 65 points with 6 tries to fullback Julia Schell. Other winners of opening weekend were Scotland, France, Ireland and South Africa. Defending champions New Zealand beat Spain on Monday morning, 54 points to 8. Competition picks up again next weekend. Fiji will face Scotland in Pool B, while Samoa is up against favourites England in Pool A, both in the early hours of Sunday morning Pacific time.
That's Pacific Waves for today. For all episodes, head over to rnz.co.nz/Pacific. We're also on Spotify, Apple and iHeartRadio. From myself and the RNZ Pacific team, tō whā sui fua.